Hello everybody and welcome back to the Cypress Hollow Zoo. My name is GrizGoat and today we're expanding our backyard zoo's rehabilitation facilities to include 3 more species in this area located right by our Raccoon Rehabilitation Center. The rehabilitation program at the Cypress Hollow Zoo will now include foxes, skunks, and collared peccaries. So like and subscribe and comment one of your favorite animals from this build. We're going to start this build off by doing some terrain work. We're going to lower it down in the front and make just a little hump kind of in the middle of the habitat for animals to hide behind and ensure that they have a nice place to hide and get out of the view of visitors. Next, we're going to lay out our mesh panels. We're going to align them to the grid of this breeze block path that I have, and then we're going to delete the breeze blocks afterwards. But that just makes it a lot easier to get them all right and use the grid to our advantage. And then we'll copy this over to the other side so that we give the guests a really good, nice, big view of our animals on display. I colored the panels a darker green just to match the branding of our zoo. This front part is going to be filled with water just to keep the distance between the animals and the guests a little further apart. We are dealing with an open air habitat and skunks, so we definitely want to create a barrier between them and the guests. We're going to lower it down just ever so slightly, just to make it feel a little less intrusive and let the guests have as much viewing area as possible. We're going to add in our dividers. We will lower these in the future, but just for now they're going to be here. So we're going to have the foxes on the left, skunks in the middle, and the collared peccaries on the right. Now it's time to start thinking about our backstage area and the internal hard shelter for our animals. This is going to be a very straight to the point habitat catering to function over form, and that's just because this is something you would typically see in a roadside zoo. We're going to add these little vents down at the bottom in the water just to explain why all 3 habitats have the same water flow. And I think it would be easier for the zoo to be able to cycle all the water at once versus 3 separate habitats. Because in our roadside zoo, budget is the most important thing. Now it's time to extend out and include our backstage area. This is where all the staff gates and backstage props, as well as the hard shelter requirements, will be met for our animals. So we're just going to copy the mesh from the front, drag it back to the back, so that we have plenty of hard shelter for our animals. Moving on to the roof, we're going to keep it consistent with this rusty corrugated metal roof. Where this zoo is located, I would expect there to be a lot of humidity, so you're not going to keep metal looking very nice for very long. We're going to add a front lip to this half of the building where the animals will be able to go outside. And then we're going to close it off using the angular pieces and 1 meter blocks. Again, in last episode, I discovered my love for putting gutters on things, so we're going to continue that and put some gutters on this building. The snap to position on gutters is definitely vital for doing gutter work in Planet Zoo, but once you do it, it's so satisfying. I would highly recommend it. We're going to add in a roof to our interior just to cover up all that ugly stuff from the corrugated iron roof. Once we get that into place, we're going to duplicate it all the way across. And then we're going to use another roofing piece. We're going to use the underside just to make it match the wood a little nicer. And then to hide the wood that was poking out of the side, we're going to just use this breeze block column that matches the walls. And it'll also give our building a little more texture and detail. Next, we're moving on to the roof of the caged area. So we're just going to duplicate this up and lay it flat across. And then of course duplicate it all the way across the top of our habitats. Moving on to the doors for the habitat, we're going to use these PVC doors. They work great. They allow the animals to walk in and out. They also have the physics and animation for when they go through that looks nice. And they're also very wide and big, so you don't have to worry about the hitboxes. Now we're going to add in our staff gates and connect them up. So 3 staff gates for 3 habitats. And then we're going to place this path where we're going to place a door for our staff to walk in and out. And it looks like we were just in time placing the door because our collared peccaries are on their way. It looks like we might have to make some adjustments to the habitat just so they don't get placed into the wall, but that's okay. We're going to check their needs and their welfare and see what we need to improve. With the peccaries, I did not take into consideration how many they need for their social group, so we are going to extend their hard shelter area. We're just going to extend it out into the enclosure and then out to the outside to make it a little bigger for them. Moving on to the floor, we're just going to keep it simple with a concrete floor, something easy that the staff can just hose off if there's a mess or anything. I'm sure peccaries are probably not very clean animals. And then, of course, skunks. Foxes probably aren't too bad, but just in case. Moving on to the foliage in this habitat, we're going to keep it simple with some buffalo grass, just kind of in the more sunny areas on this ridge line. In the shady areas, we're going to focus a little more dirt and less vegetation just because vegetation needs sun to survive, so it's not going to grow as quickly in those areas. The peccaries are going to have a lot more sand, and this little hiccup that we had in the backstage area is just going to be sand that came in through the outside. We'll have one bush just kind of off to the side for a little bit more privacy, but for the most part, we're going to leave it a little bare bones just because there's so much concrete breeze blocks. We don't want to overload it with a lot of plants that wouldn't really survive in this kind of habitat. Using the path trick, we're going to sink a foraging box into the ground. There's not a lot of space in these habitats to work with, so we got to do our best to get around things. I also made sure that it was accessible to the peccaries, and then we're going to add in a scratching post kind of up front to hopefully lure them out for the visitors. They need a little more enrichment, so we're going to add this wind chime and then add some bedding in the back. That pretty much wraps it up for our collared peccaries. Now moving on to our red foxes. These guys are great, and here is the PVC doors in action. Just like the peccary build, we're going to be keeping this very simple, using a mixture of grass, dirt, and sand. Putting most of our foliage where the sunlight hits, and not overdoing it to give it a more realistic enclosure look. It's the same buffalo grass, spreading it out towards the water's edge and then kind of in the middle here on the hill. And then I do end up taking these bushes out because they took up a little bit too much space and they are non-traversable, which I found out later. But we're putting these cattails in just for a little bit of privacy for our foxes. I imagine they're a shyer animal and want to stay out of sight as much as possible. And since this is a rehabilitation facility, we want them to feel as comfortable as possible. And what's more comfortable than some flowers? So we're going to add in a few of these. I'll add some in the peccary habitat as well. I forgot they existed in the game. We're just spreading around some enrichment. I love the duck. It's one of my favorite enrichment items. And then we're going to add this ice ball to the inside where it'll be kept cool in the air conditioning. And that's it for our red foxes. We are going to move on to our skunks. Here come our skunks now. These guys are just so adorable. It's too bad that they smell so bad. I think I've only built for skunks one time in this game so far, and that was over on Twitch, which I haven't streamed on recently. So let me know if you are interested in me streaming Planet Zoo again. Let me know in the comments. We're starting off again with terrain painting. Because skunks are nocturnal animals, I decided to move them to the center habitat where it's a little darker, so hopefully they have more activity during the day and visitors will be able to see them. But from a distance, because we have our water in the front to hopefully keep the spray down. Once again, we're just adding a nice tree to the sunny side and then putting in some more shade tolerant plants like ferns and other things. We're gonna add some lights to the outside and carry that over to the other habitat for consistency. Moving on to our backstage, we're gonna line up these fans, flip them over, and align them to the ceiling. The reason I did that is because these beams are angled, so I wanted to get them straight. Then we're gonna connect them all electrical wise with that tube, and then work on the AC unit. We're just gonna carry this across the whole thing. It'll end in the collared peccary habitat, and there will be AC going to each one, ensuring that animals stay cool in this tropical environment. And also, just to move air through, I imagine collared peccaries with skunks and probably even foxes. It's probably not the greatest mixture of smells, so we want to make sure that we have clean air for everybody. And we're just gonna move this last one into place and we'll be able to get started on our backstage items. We're sticking with the same items we used for our raccoon habitat in last episode, but we have a lot more space, so we're gonna add another table. It's gonna be in this front area just so they can walk in from the keeper hut, prepare their food or whatever they need to do at the entrance, and then walk down with the food if they're going all the way to the peccary habitat. We're gonna add these little feed buckets on each one. These will be just for miscellaneous purposes, maybe restocking the habitat's food, stuff like that. And we're just using this hook piece to hook them to the mesh, and then we're gonna line it with some wood slats across the back for stability. Then of course we're gonna give each habitat a shovel next to the door. That way it's easy access to go in and shovel the mess that is usually associated with habitats. And then just adding the little hook piece on the handle, making sure we're mounting it to the post. We're gonna add the same fence from our raccoon habitat, added over here for more consistency around our zoo. And then we're going to duplicate this section across the front. And after looking over some reference images, I'm missing one thing, and that's some support posts in these middle areas of the habitats, just to hold the mesh up. There's not going to be a lot of support right there, and we're just going to anchor them down with a concrete footing. And our build is complete, so let's take a look. Here we have the collared peccaries running through the PVC door. The interior looks great, very functional and similar to something you would see in real life. I did add these climbable platforms for the red foxes just to get their space requirements up a little bit. And here we have one coming out of his den and then right into the bushes for that little bit of privacy we spoke about earlier. Our skunk is also enjoying the enclosures, lots of space for him to run around, and our collared peccary in a field of flowers with a couple onlookers with a nice natural water barrier to help give some distance between our animals in rehab and the guests. Overall, is a fun build. Please like and subscribe. The Cypress Hollow Zoo is coming along very nicely. Let me know what we should add next in the comments. I will take your suggestions seriously. And as always, have a wonderful, wonderful day. Goodbye.